All-star closer Kenley Jansen, we have a question.
What's the best podcast of all time?
Baseball isn't boring, baby.
I'm Rob Bradford, and every single day I'm sitting down with the biggest names to show you this great game is the greatest game. It's my podcast. It's my passion. It's a cause I started more than 2 years ago and is now the most prolific national daily baseball pod there is. Another fact. So jump aboard the BIB Express. Follow and listen to Baseball Isn't Boring, presented by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's time. Time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers web zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
What's up, faithful? This is the 49ers web zone No Huddle Podcast. We're part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco, and I'm a little tired about talking about the Brandon Aiyuk situation. I'm trying to avoid it. I promise you. It's not that I don't like Brandon Aiyuk. Love Brandon Aiyuk. I want to talk about Brandon Aiyuk for the next 5 to 10 years with 49ers. When I'm prepping for these shows, especially this time of year, because it's June and there's not a lot to talk about, and you tend to get repetitive with, I guess, some of the bigger stories. And right now, the biggest story is Aiyuk. But I want to be different. I want to talk about other stuff. We also have to stay relevant. So I prepped this week. I said, okay, no Aiyuk. Not talking about Aiyuk. But then something happens with Aiyuk, and I have to talk about Aiyuk. So what happened this week? Well, he had posted a video game. Oh my God, Al, a video on his Instagram where he was talking to Jaden Daniels on the phone, and he said, "They don't want me." They said they don't want me, meaning the 49ers. Now, when I watched the video, the first thing I thought is this whole thing looks a little bit staged. You know, the camera's on him. He's talking to Daniels. He's saying they don't want me. Maybe Aiyuk is just trying to kind of play games through social media, get the fans involved, get the fans in an uproar. Then fan pressure comes on the Niners and they have to up their offer. Maybe. And if he did that, you know what? I'll blame him. Good for him. He's got to play his game too. He's got to try to get his money too. He's got to do his side of, this whole negotiation and everything else too. But I don't think the 49ers ever said that they don't want Aiyuk. I would be surprised if they said that. I think they do want Aiyuk. Here's the thing. I don't know if they want Aiyuk at the price Aiyuk is asking for. You look at the way the Niners have done these contracts. Look, they are not cheap. Back when you had Trent Baalke there, you could say, yeah, you know what? The Niners are kind of cheap. Remember, the Niners would be in on players, but like they were in on them at their price. So when you're in on a free agent at your price, you're not really in on the free agent. And there was a lot of that going on back then, but that hasn't been the case. I think Jed York has proven that he's going to spend money and even give his own players a raise, like you just saw recently with McCaffrey. The one player, though, well, let me say this. They spend money, but they also are very, Tim Kawakami said it well, where he said they're very pointed in their contract discussions. And they have a player's worth in mind. And I don't think that's cheap. I think their offers are fair. I mean, you've seen them resign or extend, I should say, Kittle and Debo and Warner. Like I said, they just gave McCaffrey more money. They ponied up a lot for Trent Williams to keep them here, but to keep him with the 49ers. But they typically are not going to go far out of their comfort zone. The one player that I believe that they did go out of their comfort zone with was Nick Bosa. And he's a little bit of a different animal. He is the elite of the elite. He was the defensive player of the year. He was somebody you weren't gonna let go when you kind of had to meet his demands. And the Bosas, as we know, they can be a little bit difficult in contract negotiations. They know their worth and they're sticking to it. The only time we've really seen anything go sort of sideways in the Lynch Shanahan regime has been with DeForest Buckner, where they decided to sign Armstead instead, and they traded away Buckner. And they ended up replacing him with Javon Kinlaw, which didn't work out. And then they had to sign Javon Hargrave. So maybe they just would have been better off signing Buckner. But for the most part, the Niners take care of their own. They bring their own players back. So I doubt San Francisco said, we don't want you. But at that $30 million mark per year, maybe they don't. The offer is supposedly 26. I still think they're going to come together at 28. I just hope that they don't play games until this happens. But I made a point last show, but I wanted to add some other numbers to this point to sort of back it up again. Now, BA is a terrific wide receiver. I think he's an ascending wide receiver. But whether you think he's top 5, top 20, or somewhere in between, he's not used like an alpha number one option in terms of volume on the 49ers. Now, if your plan is to give him more targets and pay him for what he will do moving forward, and there's that increased volume there, well, that would make more sense to the team to pay him like a CeeDee Lamb or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, guys who get 150, 160, 170 targets a year. But if the production stays the same, okay, so looking at his last 2 years, Aiyuk in 2023 gained 1,352 yards. That was 7th in the league. His yards per reception, 17.9, was 2nd in the NFL. So that's pretty good. You're talking 2nd in the NFL in yards per reception and 7th in receiving yards. That's big time production. But his receptions were set. He had 75, that was 31st, and he had 105 targets, that was 36th. He had 7 TDs, which was 18th. So other than that, the numbers were, in terms of where he ranked in the league anyway, is sort of pedestrian, middle of the road in terms of what you would see for someone who's a higher end player on the team. Now, he did a lot with those targets, a lot, like we just said, but volume wise, he just doesn't get that kind of production. Let's look at 2022. Let's look at this 2-year sample. And I do want to say before I say this, he did play in a different offense in 2022 because he was with Jimmy G for most of the year. So that's not an offense like you're seeing now where they're going to attack more downfield. It was more dink and dunk until Purdy got there towards the end. And he was 13th in yards per reception, 2022. He had 1,015 yards, that was 22nd. 114 targets, that was 28th. 78 receptions, that was 22nd. And 8 receiving yards, which was 11th. 8 receiving touchdowns, I should say, which was 11th. So again, middle of the road, good receiver in terms of production, but $30 million. So his usage numbers are closer to a number 2, a Devontae Smith, a Jalen Waddle. And when you're using that offense, that's how the Niners are gonna pay him. He's not gonna get St. Brown money. He's not gonna get CeeDee Lamb or AJ Brown or anything like that. I was reading an article by Doug Farrer of USA Today, and he was writing about Aiyuk, a very complimentary article about Aiyuk, and he put some interesting stats out there. So I just gave you the year by year statistics for Aiyuk. When you look at the last 2 years combined, now combine them where he ranks amongst everybody. He has 153 catches, that's 22nd. He has 219 targets, that's 29th. 2,357 receiving yards, that's 11th. And he's 11th in touchdowns with 15 in receiving touchdowns. Now, having said that, no qualifying wide receiver other than Aiyuk has a higher yards per target, other than Rashid Shaheed of the Saints has a higher yards per target than Aiyuk at 11.1. And his target average over the last 2 seasons, 10.8. And Ayuk's catch rate of 69.9% is really high for someone who gets deep targets. And I should say his 11.1 was last year and 10.8 for the last 2 years. But yeah, so Aiyuk to have that catch rate almost 70%, and they're throwing the ball downfield for him. That shows you he's making the most of his opportunities. So it's going to be something. It's not going to go away again. As much as I don't want to keep talking about it, I really don't. I kind of hope they just get this done. But the way the Niners do things, it seems like it's going to drag on. It doesn't seem like there's any end in sight for this. I just hope and pray. I do not want it to drag on into training camp, because then you're gonna miss part of the season. Or if he doesn't miss part of the season, he's gonna start slow for part of the season. So that's definitely worrisome for me. But not going away. We'll talk about things as they update. There's going to be some posturing back and forth between the two sides, and hopefully they're going to get this done sooner than later. I hope.
It's the most anticipated WNBA season in history.
So you know what that means.
Court is back in session with Queens of the Court, a WNBA podcast.
I'm your girl, Cheryl Swoops.
And I'm Jordan Robinson. All WNBA season long, we'll bring you interviews with star athletes, analysis on your favorite teams,
and lots of hot takes.
Order in the court.
Follow and listen to Queens of the Court, free on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. The other thing that really stuck out to me recently since the last time we recorded, Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence gets a huge contract. 5 years, $275 million, a couple $100 million in guarantee. So he's getting $55 million per year. So where's the first place my head goes with this? I started thinking about, all right, if this is the contract that Trevor Lawrence is getting, what is Brock Purdy going to get? If Brock Purdy is even 85% of what he was in 2023. How does he not get $300 million over 5 years? Right? He's going to be there. And the 49ers better not let this deal linger like they do with a lot of their other contracts and extensions. And I read an article that said Purdy's camp wants to get this done soon. Niners can't drag it on. If he wants to get it done, get it done. Try to get it done before Dak Prescott gets a ridiculous deal. Before some of these other quarterback numbers keep getting higher and higher and higher, because the number is just going to go up. And I don't see there's any way he's not. I mean, I don't even want to say the Trevor Lawrence contract is the floor. Yeah, higher than that is the floor now. Lawrence, looking at what he did. Okay, so let's look at Lawrence, what he's done in his career versus what Purdy's done in his career. I was going through his stats on Pro Football Reference, and I think I was probably a little bit surprised. I mean, I know he's kind of hasn't lived up to the hype, but he did have a top 7 MVP finish in 2022. And he made the Pro Bowl that year. 2022 was Lawrence's best season. But his QBR has never been above 56.1. 56.1 is his career high, and he did it twice. His career rating is 85. His career yards per attempt is 6.7. He has 58 touchdowns, passes to 39 interceptions. He has a completion percentage of 62.8 and a 46.4 passing success rate percentage. His TD percentage is 3.3, which is pretty low. Now, if you take out his rookie year, which was the Urban Meyer year, and they only won 3 games, and it was a disaster, we'll take that out for this exercise. Lawrence is 17-16 as a starting quarterback, or I should say the Jags are 17-16 with him as a starting quarterback. I don't really love that win-loss record for quarterbacks, but his team with him starting is 17-16. Now, he did win a playoff game. He also did throw 4 interceptions in that playoff game, and in 2 playoff games, he's 1-1, and he has 5 picks in those 2 games. The only thing he's ever led the league in. So as a quarterback, what statistics did he lead the league in? Only thing he ever led the league in, 17 interceptions in 2021. That is not something you want to lead the league in. Let's look at Brock, who's very young in his career. Trevor Lawrence has played 3 full seasons. Purdy's played a season plus, right? I mean, you want to call it a season and a half. The season in 6 games, really. Still, the accomplishments. He was a top 4 MVP finish in the Pro Bowl in 2023. His QBR in his 2 seasons, 65.7 and 72.8, so much higher than Lawrence. His career QB rating, 111.4. Yards per attempt, 9.2 for his career. He has 44 touchdown passes to 15 interceptions. We just said, where did Lawrence have? 58-39. Big difference. Purdy's completion percentage, 68.7%. His passing success rate, 53.4%. TD percentage, we said Lawrence's was a really low 3.3. Purdy's is 7.2%. 49ers record with him as a starting quarterback, 17-4 in the regular season, really 18-4 because he came in that first series in the Dolphins game and he played that whole game. So again, if you're counting quarterback statistics like a pitcher's win-loss record, he would have gotten the win there. So really that record's even better if you look at it that way. Purdy has 4 playoff wins, 2 NFC Championship game appearances, and a Super Bowl appearance. Now, Lawrence only led the league in interceptions. That's all he's led the league in. Purdy, everything he's led the league in already so far. TD percentage, yards per attempt, yards per completion, rating, QBR, average yards gained per pass attempt, yet net yards gained per pass attempt, adjusted net yards per pass attempt. All those things he led the league in. How is he not going to get much more than Lawrence if he does similar, even similar this year? All he's got to be is similar. Doesn't have to repeat the same numbers. 85% of what he was in 2023. He's getting a monster contract. How can you not give him that deal? And I saw a stat, I think it was on Craig Carton's show in New York. No, I'm sorry. They talked about it on Craig Carton's show in New York, but it's from the 33rd team FB on Twitter. So in Lawrence's first 48 career starts, so I'll give you Lawrence's number and then player B. Win-loss record, Trevor Lawrence, 20-28. Player B, 19-29. Completion percentage, Trevor Lawrence, 63.8. Player B, 63.1. Total yards, Trevor Lawrence, 12,204. Player B, 12,204. Player B, 12,014. Total TDs, Lawrence 66, player B 64. Total turnovers, Lawrence 55. Player B also has 55. In team points per game, 20.3 for Lawrence, 19.6 for player B. Player B is Daniel Jones, arguably one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league, or certainly near the bottom, the way he's performed so far. So he's statistically near Daniel Jones. And you could say, Al, there's different scenarios, there's different reasons why Lawrence is there. You got to put his, had a really bad rookie season. You have to put that in there as well. All true things. But what we're talking about here is if Lawrence got that contract, what is Brock Purdy going to get accomplishing what he accomplished? And even if you look at Dak's had some really good statistical seasons comparable to what Purdy's done. But what has Dak not done winning the playoffs? So Purdy even has that over Dak. You know what? Do you understand what I'm saying here? So if he did sign after Dak, let's say Dak gets $62 million a year or something ridiculous, especially if he hits the open market. And I know guarantees are a big part of it too, but let's just talk yearly for this exercise. Purdy has every right to say, give me more, right? He has another similar year. The reason for that is he has the playoff success. He's won 4 playoff games. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to 2 NFC championships. If the Niners get back to a Super Bowl, if the Niners win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy and he has a comparable season, oh my God. Can he ask for $65 million? Can he ask for 70? I mean, the number is going to be absolutely astronomical. It's going to be nuts. So it's really, really important that the Niners get this done. But look, if he does, it's a good thing for the 49ers and 49ers fans, right? I mean, if you're in this situation, you have a guy who is, if you're paying him that much money, who for really the third season in a row, he's proved that he is a legit franchise dude. And it's a good problem to have. Now, you will have to make decisions when you're paying somebody that much money. The Niners aren't going to be able to have the kind of squad that they have now, being able to pay all these other players and that sort of thing when you're paying the quarterback that much. And that could be where this Aiyuk contract plays into it as well, because you kind of don't know where Purdy's going to land. So the Niners may be trying to kind of, hedge their bets a little bit with it like that, but we'll see. Only other thing I want to talk about, saw an article that was in The Athletic, and they were talking about, are the 49ers offseason losers? And they had them as offseason losers. It's a little interesting to me because I don't see how they're losers. They got kind of, on offense, they stayed the same. One of the reasons they gave for that they're losers on the offensive side of the ball is they didn't upgrade the offensive line. Okay, I agree with that. I do think that there could have been some upgrades there. Dominic Pooney may be an upgrade. He may be starting at the guard position. That could end up upgrading. Could end up upgrading pass blocking. They brought up the defense too. I was a little surprised by that. Now, if you listen to this show, you know that I am concerned about the defense, but I don't know that you could say that they were necessarily losers on the defense, and I'll explain with that. So there was a lot of turnover with their defense. Javon Kinlaw is gone. Chase Young is gone. Eric Armstead is gone. So on the defensive line, you saw a lot of turnover, and they brought in new guys. Gross Matos, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, Leonard Floyd. I don't know that they got worse. I don't know if they got better either. We'll see. But to say they were a loser, you can't say they got worse there. Here's the thing about the Niners defense last season, especially the defensive line. Well, let me say the thing about the Niners defensive line wasn't that good last year. Really wasn't. It was good in name. It was good in recognition. Oh, the 49ers, they have a good defense, but really, they really wasn't that good. They got run on like crazy towards the end of the season. They did not play well towards the end of the season. They did not play well in most of the 2 playoff games. Did play well in the Super Bowl up until the end. A large reason why they played well in the Super Bowl was Eric Armstead played out of his mind, right? But I don't necessarily think they're losers. I think if anything on the defensive side of the ball, it's TBD. Offensively, if you're running it back and you're adding a Ricky Pearsall, who in the article they said that he was a reach, and he was, but if he's a good fit for the Niners and he can be successful in that offense, then it's not a reach, right? He was a reach before he was supposed to be selected, but you have to see how he performs first before you can really say, yeah, this guy wasn't worth the first round pick. They had Jacob Cowing, who I think is going to make the team, and he's not going to have a ton of playing time this year, but I think he'll make a few big catches, a few big downfield catches in the role that he'll play. You add a Garendo, you assume Elijah Mitchell is healthy. you had Logan Thomas as a second tight end. The offense is at worst going to be the same. And it was a really, really good offense last year. So you didn't get worse there. Defensively, is it TBD? Yeah, it is. Secondary looks good in terms of the cornerbacks. I think that's probably the strongest part of the defense right now with Ward, Lenore. You bring in Green. I like the Yadam pickup. Safety is a big question mark. I'm really surprised that, and they still may bring in like a Justin Simmons or someone like that, but I either read an article from Mayoko or he was on Camp or something, but he was saying that he doesn't think they're going to add a safety. And I was surprised by that because right now you have Jair Brown, you have Mustafa, you have Hufanga and George Odom. Hufanga, you don't know what you're going to get because of injury. Mustafa's a rookie. Jair Brown is unproven, and Odom's pretty much a special teams guy. So there's a lot of unknown there for me. That scares me a little bit. Linebackers without Greenlaw can be a little scary. We'll see what Devondre Campbell can bring if he can find his form from a couple years ago. Bosa's Bosa, but the revamped defensive line is going to go a long way in showing what this team can be on defense this year. I talked about Malik Collins a couple shows ago. I think he's going to be a linchpin. I think he's probably the most important signing. He's got to come in and play really well, and he's an underappreciated guy, right? He's an underrated guy. He can do that. But then you have to see, does Leonard Floyd still have gas left in the tank? Is Gross Matos, who's going to be a big part of the defense, can he be a Charles Omenihu type? Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, can these guys stop the run? That worries me still this year, stopping the run. So I don't think that they had a bad offseason. I think that they had maybe a let's see offseason. But the changes on the defensive line, if the defense does struggle, and they are struggling there, then you can go back and say, you know what? Yeah, they revamped the D-line. They brought in some of these guys who they were taking chances on, and it didn't work out. But that remains to be seen. I don't think you can come out and say right now that it wasn't a successful offseason until you see how these guys come in and play. Because look, remember when the Niners traded for Charles Omenihu, they had a bad record at the time. They were 3-5 or whatever it was, and they traded a 5th-round pick for him. And I'm like, great. They traded a 5th-round pick for a rotational defensive lineman. Who cares? Who cares? You're 3-5. This is not going to do anything. And they turned it around, and he was a big piece of helping them turn it around because they got untapped potential out of him. They figured out how to use him. Chris Kosurek figured out how to get the best out of him. And they were able to do that with a lot of guys they brought in. Guys like Arden Key, or I don't know, you say Cleveland Farrell, but all these guys that they bring in who are like, all right, what can we get out of them? And the Niners, I feel like, do tend to get the best out of them as well. Ebukam was the other name I was thinking of. So we'll see if they can do that with this defensive line this year, but definitely not losers. Definitely not yet. All right. That's all I got for this show. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
9-0-3. 1, 2, 3. Hey!
2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.